¿Alguna vez te has preguntado
Papi, papi, papi.
Welcome to Pixie Hollow.
Tinkerbell is one of the greatest characters created by Walt Disney. And I always wondered, where did Tinkerbell come from?
When we were talking about what this first movie about Tinkerbell should be about, it seemed natural to do an origin story. How did Tinkerbell come to be? What is her world like?
Creating Pixie Hollow was a very awe-inspiring experience, delving into the world that really, where nobody has really gone before.
We wanted to explore this fantastic world through the perspective of Tinkerbell as she sees it for the first time.
Oh, it's incredible.
And discovers all the amazing and fascinating things that are going on there.
when the moon comes out to shine her face,
We have an enormously talented team of artists that all put their heads together to create the world of Pixie Hollow.
Who's that then?
It's Tinkerbell, you snail brain! So pretty.
Tinkerbell is one of Walt Disney's most iconic characters of all time.
Thank you.
So creating this movie was a huge responsibility. Every detail, every step along the way was taken with such care and pride for Peter Pan that came before us.
To the air, fairies! To the air!
There's been a good bit of research done into fairies and their world. I'm going back to, of course, J.M. Barrie, who we consider to be one of the foremost researchers in the field of fairies.
Well, we drew from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, we drew from Walt Disney's Peter Pan, and we also drew from the realm of the Never Fairies to create the world of Pixie Hollow.
Just a little bit of pixie dust.
Peter Pan, the original Walt Disney animated film, was our starting point because we wanted to make sure there was a sense of continuity in the look of the two films, of Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. In fact, the first time we see Neverland in Tinkerbell, it's a reproduction in CG of the first time Peter Pan and Wendy see Neverland in Peter Pan.
Oh, Peter, it's just as I've always dreamed it would be. Oh, wow.
We always wanted to make you aware when you're in Pixie Hollow that you're in Neverland as well. So those mountains are always the backdrop of any of the shots that are in Pixie Hollow. One of the other major influences was Albert Bierstadt, who was a painter around the 1860s, who went west and painted places like Yosemite and the Sierras before anyone was out here from the east. And he painted visions of those places in a way that was magical and romantic and almost otherworldly.
We really assembled an amazing group of artists to come up with this great mythology about what fairies do and what they can lend to our world.
Fairies to the south, to the east and west!
When I first heard about the Tinkerbell Fairies project, it actually came from Disney Publishing. And they started describing Pixie Hollow, and I was so blown away by how they were connecting the fairies to nature. And I thought this is the key to Tinkerbell and the world she came from.
We wanted to set up the world of Pixie Hollow and also support the idea that fairies bring the magic of nature to the world. So Jeff Howard, screenwriter, and myself worked with his team and also our incredible storyboard artists. And Janine Russell, our producer, and Fred Warder, our art director.
One of the most interesting ideas that came out of our whole brainstorming process was the idea that within Pixie Hollow, there are different realms for every season. There's an area for spring where it's always warm and temperate in springtime. There's an area for summer. There's an area for fall. And there's the winter woods where it's always snowy there.
The world of Pixie Hollow is centered around pixie dust. The pixie dust tree is the center point of the world. That's the key visual image of Tinkerbell.
The pixie dust is the sap of the tree. And the idea was that the roots of the pixie dust tree spread out to all the different corners of Pixie Hollow. So the Pixie Hollow itself is really infused with the magic of pixie dust.
The wonderful thing about designing Pixie Hollow was that we were able to look at everyday objects and nature from a different perspective.
One of the most fun parts of coming up with what Pixie Hollow looked like was working with scale and how everything would relate to a fairy that's, 5.5, 6 inches tall. We tried to go down to the fairy's perspective.
We call it fairy cam when we were designing the movie and getting really down, really low with the fairies and really seeing how they would see it within their eyes.
I'd get my camera down on the ground, shoot photographs, and sometimes if it seemed really real, like it could have been made by a fairy, I tried to carefully bring it back with me to the office to have as inspiration. I constantly urged the artist to go out into nature, to take hikes, and to go out with the idea that if you were 5.5 inches to 6 inches tall, you're so tiny, what would you use for clothing? How would you make tools? How would you create a shelter out of leaves and things that you would find in a forest or on the beach? And it just really opens up your eyes.
Janine brought in a little seed pod that almost looked like a little bowl.
Slow down, Cheese! I can't keep up!
Watch out for falling...
Watch out for falling maple seeds!
John Lasseter actually brought in those little maple seeds that spin down from the trees. And so we ended up using those for fairy ceiling fans. And we also use them to sort of drop things from tops of trees.
All of us started to bring in these objects to work with us. Like, wow, look what I found over the weekend. It's just a whole different way of looking at our world and then creating a world for fairies.
You've arrived at a most glorious time!
When he first started talking about the designs of the costumes, John Lasseter said, these costumes should be designed around things that you see in nature.
So all we really had to do was look around in nature and find the beauty in a rose petal or the beauty in the color of the ocean. And that really helped to inspire the clothing for these fairies.
The character designers would just pull flowers apart and place them on dolls and try to find the most organic way to have that flower wrap around a character so that it felt very natural but also very beautiful and helped the character to feel like they were a part of nature at all times.
So they use leaves and they use flower petals and they use all kinds of things that are of their scale to create their clothing.
I'll get to apply my artistic sensibility.
Rosetta, the garden fairy, actually has an upside-down rose as her dress.
The last light of day. It's the richest kind of all.
And Iridessa, our light fairy, she's wearing sunflower petals. So that gives you scale and it's just a lot more magical.
Most of us walk through life and we don't maybe see what's really around us. And I think all of us need to kind of get down on our picnic blankets next time we go to the park and really look around us to see that scale and what world exists down below.
En la historia de la exploración espacial está por surgir el valiente relato de 5 héroes extraordinarios en una intrépida misión de rescate. Un relato en el que los héroes surgen de los lugares menos imaginables.
Menos 3 minutos para lanzamiento. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y despegue.
Me llamo Sputnik. ¿Podrían llevarme a casa con ustedes?
Ya ladraste, chico.
Es mi última oportunidad de ir a casa con mi humano Sasha.
Nos perdimos en el espacio, chicos. ¡Wow!
¿Vamos a ir a la luna?
Todo el queso que te puedas comer.
¿Están listos para dar el paseo de sus vidas?
Hasta yo peso menos que una pluma.
Ahora, ¿cómo volvemos a casa?
Cachorros en el espacio, una nueva película en Disney DVD y Blu-ray de alta definición.
¡No le muerdas la pata!
Dentro de 700 años, la humanidad abandonará la Tierra, dejando la limpieza de nuestro planeta en manos de una increíble máquina. Él es Wall-E. Después de tantos años, ha desarrollado un pequeño desperfecto. Una personalidad. Es extremadamente curioso. Y a veces se siente un poco solo. Pero todo eso está a punto de cambiar.
¡Arresten a ese robot!
No. 10 segundos para autodestrucción. A partir de ahora puede recorrer la cabina.
Solo un corte. Debes hermosa.
¡Alto!
Cuando las tardes se hacen muy largas, los hermanos Phineas y Ferb siempre tienen un plan.
Ya sé qué vamos a hacer hoy.
Vivir una aventura increíble antes de que mamá vuelva a casa.
Hola, chicos. Hola, mamá.
Llega una nueva serie Disney Channel, Phineas y Ferb. Todos los días, un día extraordinario. Vela solo por Disney Channel.
¡Guau, Puchi!